In this video from ITFreeTraining, I will look at the Security Configuration Wizard. The Security Configuration Wizard allows you to tighten security up on your servers, which helps prevent them from being accessed by unauthorized users. Before I start looking at Security Configuration Wizard and how it can help you keep your server secure in your company, I will first look at the concept of attack surface. This will help you understand why tightening security on your servers using tools like Security Configuration Wizard is so important. The attack surface is software, protocols, and ports that an attacker could potentially exploit in order to gain control of your server. If you take a typical server, the server has services, software, and protocols that make it work. Depending on what you require the server to do, there is potentially extra software, protocols, and ports that are not required and could be used to compromise your server by an attacker. There may not be a vulnerability that can be used to exploit the server today, but tomorrow there could be. This is why it is important that anything that is not required is removed or disabled. In some cases, you may not be able to remove or disable a particular item. For example, let's say a protocol is required by a server to allow old clients to connect. In this case, you could not disable this protocol until all the old clients have been removed from the network. However, another option may be to increase the security of that protocol. Perhaps bigger encryption keys could be used, or there may be an option to encapsulate the protocol in a more secure protocol. Lastly, the firewall on the server should be enabled and configured with rules that prevent unwanted traffic. For example, if you do not require the time service on the server, this should be blocked on the firewall. You can see that by reducing the attack surface on a server, you greatly reduce the chance of a hacker being able to access your server now and when a new vulnerability is found tomorrow. This video will look at how you can reduce the attack surface on your server using Security Configuration Wizard. The process of making your computers more secure is also referred to as hardening. Without further ado, I'll change to a server on my DMZ and look at how to use the Security Configuration Wizard. I have chosen this server as it is accessible on the internet and thus at high risk of attack. First of all, I will open Security Configuration Wizard from Administrative Tools under the Start menu. On the Welcome screen of the wizard, notice that there is a warning message telling you that the wizard can only detect open ports if the software that is using these ports is running. Before you run the wizard, you should ensure that any software on the server is running. This way, the wizard can correctly read any settings that it may require. On the next screen of the wizard, you need to select if you are creating a new security policy, editing an existing one, applying a security policy, or rolling back a previously applied security policy. In this case, I do not have a security policy configured, so I will choose the top option, Create a New Security Policy. On the next screen is the welcome screen for role-based service configuration. The wizard itself is divided into a number of different sections, like this one, to make it easier to work out which settings you are configuring. The next screen shows you which roles are currently configured on the server. If you are planning on adding a role later on, you should tick the role. For example, later on I will be adding the file server role, so I will tick it here. If your needs change later on, you can always rerun the wizard and make the required changes, so do not be concerned if you do not know at this stage which roles may be installed later on. On the next screen, you can decide which features you want to use. Following this screen, you can also select which options you want to configure. Options are very small features in the operating system and thus do not fit into the feature or roles category. On the next screen, you can select which additional services you want to allow or disable. These are services that are not associated with a role or feature or installed by third-party software. On the next screen, you can decide what to do with services that were not defined on the previous screen. In other words, an unexpected service not covered by the previous options. By default, The option "Do not change the startup mode of the service" is selected. If you have third-party software that installed a service on the server, this will allow it to continue to run after the Security Configuration Wizard has applied a policy. In this case, I want to make sure services that I do not know about are disabled, so I will select the option "Disable the service." If I find that later on I need a service that was disabled, I can simply re-enable it. The next screen shows you the changes to the services that will be made. You can see that services like the audio service have been disabled. On this server, there is no need for audio, so this is a good choice of service to stop. If you want to make sure your server is as secure as possible, you should disable services like these that will never be used. Having extra services provides additional software on the server that a hacker may be able to take advantage of in order to gain access to your server. This is the end of the service section. The next part of the wizard deals with network settings. Once past the welcome screen, the next screen will ask about firewall rules. You should disable rules that you do not require. For example, this server will have a static IP address and will not have the DHCP role installed on it. For this reason, I will untick the rules for DHCP. If you need a very secure server, you should go through and untick anything that you do not need. For example, if you are never planning on using IP6 on the server, you should untick it. Any additional rules that you leave enabled potentially could be used to take advantage of a vulnerability on the server. The next section is the registry section. These settings make changes to the registry to increase security or decrease security. Each section has a tick box to skip that section if you do not want to configure it. This is very useful if you want to make a small change later and do not want to go through all the prompts again. On the next screen, you can configure security settings related to SMB. SMB is used in file sharing. The default option will increase security, but will do it by not allowing old clients to connect and put some extra load on the CPU. Unless you need to, it is best to leave these two options ticked. The next screen determines which authentication will be used with LAN Manager by the server to the remote computer. You will only need to configure options here if you are using old clients. The next screen applies to inbound LAN authentication methods. The two options are LAN Manager and NTLM version 2. LAN Manager is an old version of file sharing, so if you do not have any old clients that use it, you may as well disable it. The next screen allows you to review the registry settings before they are applied. This helps you understand what changes will be made from what you have currently configured. The next section is the audit policy. Auditing allows an event to be generated when certain events happen on the system. This allows you to determine who is using the system and also who is attempting to use the system and getting denied. Later in the course, I will be covering auditing in more detail. The next screen allows you to determine when events should be generated. Auditing does put extra load on your system, so if you do not need it, it is best to select the option "Do not audit." In this case, since I want to determine if someone is attempting to access the server without authorization, I will select the option to audit successful and unsuccessful events on the server. The next screen allows you to review what settings will be changed. Notice also the tick box at the bottom. Also include the SCW Audit INF security template. This is a special template that changes some permissions in the operating system, making it more secure. It should be noted here that since it is effectively applying a security template to local group policy, this can be rolled back later on using the rollback feature. If you want to reverse these settings, you will need to change the settings yourself or apply a different security template to change the settings. Security templates were covered in the last video if you want to know how to do this. Once I press Next, the next screen tells me all the settings that have been configured, and now the settings are ready to be saved. On the next screen, I need to decide where to save the file and to what directory. In this case, I will save the file to a network location so that I can access it on another server. Notice that I also have the option to include a security template if I wish to use configuration from a previously created security template. This effectively provides a bridge between the newer security configuration wizard and the older security templates, allowing you to use any security templates that you may have. Now that I have configured and saved my settings, I will now change to my second server to apply the settings. Although I should apply the settings on the first server since I want to secure it as well, I will apply them to this server first to demonstrate how easy it is to apply the settings on different servers. Just like on the last server, I will open the Security Configuration Wizard from Administrative Tools under the Start menu. Once I am past the Welcome screen, I will select the option Apply an Existing Security Policy. Once I browse to the Settings Security Policy, all I need to do is press Next. The next screen will ask me which server I want to apply the setting to. In this case, I will be applying the setting to the local server. You can apply the settings to a remote server, however, it is possible for the new security settings that you apply from remote will prevent you from accessing the server. For this reason, I prefer to apply the settings from the local server rather than from remote unless I am completely sure it will not prevent me accessing the server afterwards. If you do decide to apply the settings to a remote server, ensure that you have console access to the server in case you cannot access the server from remote afterwards. On the next screen, you have the option to select View Security Policy if you want to view what the settings will be before you apply them. If you are happy with the settings, press Next and they will be applied. In some cases, you may want to roll back the changes if you find that they have done more harm than good. If this occurs, you can reverse the process, otherwise known as rollback, and return back to the original settings. Once the settings have been applied, I will close the wizard and open it again. Once I am past the Welcome screen, this time I will select the option Roll back the last applied security policy. Once again, I will need to enter in the server that I want to roll back the changes to. In this case, it will be the local server. On the next screen, you can view the rollback file to see what changes will be applied. The rollback will be started when I press Next. This is one way you can apply the security settings configured using the Security Configuration Wizard. However, if you are using computers that are in the domain, you will most likely want to use group policy to deploy these settings. To do this, I will change to one of my domain controllers in the New York site. In order to create a GPO from the settings that I have already created, this will need to be done from the command prompt. Once I open a command prompt, I will use the command scwcmd. The first parameter I need to add is transform to indicate that I want to convert the security policy to another format. I could also perform other actions that I would normally perform in the wizard, like applying a security policy and rolling back a security policy if I wanted to. The next parameter is /p. This indicates the security policy I want to use. To do this, add a colon and then the file name. Next, you need to use the /g parameter to indicate the group policy object that I want to create. Once again, I need to add a colon followed by the name. The command itself does not take too long to run. Once complete, I will next open Group Policy Management from the Start menu. If I open Group Policy Objects, I can see the new group policy that I created. The GPO has not been linked as yet to any OUs, and thus will not have any effect on any computers in the domain. In this case, I will link it to the OU testing. With all the potential changes that this group policy could make, I would highly recommend testing it first before you deploy it on any production computers. In the real world, it is easy to tighten up security on all your servers, but high security does come at a price. When managing your servers, identify high-risk servers. Servers that are accessible on the internet fit into this category. Consider, is the extra security worth the extra cost? Tightening up the security on a server and accidentally denying access to all your users, preventing them from doing their jobs, costs the company money and productivity. Extra security will often create more help desk calls when systems no longer work as expected. When considering how to secure your servers, it is often a matter of finding a balance between cost and security. If you are not sure which settings to change, start with only a few settings. If there are no problems, you can increase the number of settings. If there are problems, you have the ability to quickly revert the setting back until you can work out what went wrong. In this video, I have looked at the Security Configuration Wizard, a great wizard for improving the security on your servers. This is only one video in the free Active Directory course. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.